This is the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, episode number 39. Finding the right language to describe how groups of people agree on the meaning of the things they're working with is hard. Torrey Podmajersky is uniquely well prepared to meet this challenge. She was raised in a home where it was common to have philosophical discussions about semantics over dinner. More recently, she's worked as a designer at tech companies like Google, collaborating with diverse teams to find and share the meaning in complex systems.
Welcome to the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, where experts on knowledge graphs and the semantic web share their wisdom with the digital and business communities. Our mission is to demystify and democratize knowledge graph technology and practices to make the benefits of knowledge graphs and semantic technology accessible to all. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 39 of the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast. I am really delighted today to welcome to the show Torrey Podmajersky. I've known Torrey for years from the content world, the UX design and content design, UX writing, and all those worlds. We used to live very close to her office in Seattle. But Torrey's currently the president at Catbird Content, her consultancy, and she's guest faculty at the University of Washington High School. She does all kinds of interesting stuff. Very accomplished author. So welcome, Torrey. Tell the folks a little bit more about what you're up to and where all the books are at these days.
Thanks so much, Larry. I am up to my neck in finishing the books right now. So one just came out, the second edition of Strategic Writing for UX, that has a brand new chapter on building LLMs into products, and updates throughout, of course, since it came out 6 years ago. But I'm also working on the final manuscript with two co-authors for UX Skills for Business Strategy. That'll be a wine pairing guide, a deep reference book that connects the business impacts that you might want to make, whether you're a UX pro or a PM or a knowledge graph enthusiast working somewhere in product, and connecting it to the UX skills you might want to use to make those impacts.
Excellent. I can't wait to read both of those. I love the first edition of the Strategic Writing for UX book. But hey, I want to talk today, though, about, this is the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast. And you recently did this great post, and we'll talk more about it in detail in a bit, about how you had discovered the Psych project, which is a real pioneering project in the semantic technology field and really foundational to a lot of the knowledge graph stuff that's happening today. But I want to start with one of the other things we talked about before we went on the air was your observation of the kind of common philosophical roots that we have in rhetoric. I don't know, maybe not necessarily rhetoric, but like the stuff that we do as word nerds, as meaning nerds, as all these different kinds of technology nerds that we are. Tell me a little bit about what you meant, because you just hinted at it, and I was like, oh, good, philosophy. I love philosophy.
Yeah, I love philosophy too, especially through my dad. My dad was a philosophy major, and it is deeply at Haverford College, and it has deeply influenced his life and his work in semantic knowledge spaces. And I got to grow up in that context, thinking that everybody thought deeply about what things meant and how we represent those meanings. I mean, the Plato's allegory of the cave was my bedtime story, to the extent that we all knew Plato in the cave. Geez, Dad, just fine. Plato in the cave. We don't really know anything. All we have is facsimiles and representations of meaning and representations of reality. And through that, we construct meaning. Mm-hmm. And that's all. I feel like that's all we're ever doing, is using language to construct meaning based on our inability to fully perceive reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just for folks who aren't familiar, I love Plato's allegory of the cave. It's these poor people chained to a wall, and behind them is a projector projecting stuff on the wall in front of them. So all they see is this projection of of an imitation of reality, which is much like what we're doing with either both UX writing and I think ontology design and semantic engineering. So that's the perfect analogy to come into this. But your job for the last, I don't know, when did you, because you made the transition from teaching to Xbox, what, 10, 12 years ago, something like that? Or?
It was in 2010, I joined Xbox. And before that, I'd had a short stint in internal communications in a division at Microsoft, working for a VP
Okay.
there.
But you've been in the word biz and the meaning biz for a long time, because UX writing is, how did you say it? But you're representing, you have to convey meaning. That's the whole point of UX writing, is to just get past random words to actually, like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's to make the words that people understand so quickly while they're in an experience. They're just trying to use it. They're not there to read. So we want the words to disappear into ephemeral meaning in their head. But they don't even remember. They just knew what to do and which button to press and where to go next to get done what they wanted to get done.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things about that is, like, getting to that language to do that in an experience, that's a team sport. And that's one of the other things that really struck me about that post you did, was like the role of community in language and meaning. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is a team sport, because in general, even if it's the person doing the UX writing or that content design is also the product designer, is also the interaction designer, what they're trying to do is take a wide variety of people, who might be using this product. It might be an incredibly diverse set of people, or it might be a very narrow set of people, right? Like, let's say all IT pros, like, we want to sell this product to big corporations that have IT pros that want to manage their data centers. It's a pretty narrow slice of humans, but it's still hugely diverse in terms of what, from what languages they're speaking and what kind of resources they have inside this company, to the kind of background they have, to all of the different reasons they might need to manage their data centers right now, from hey, something new came online, or there needed to be a new partition or new admin management of access to it, or security patch updates, to things like, oh, there was an earthquake at a data center and I need to migrate all of my migrate and secure and audit any damage that might have happened, right? So there's a huge number of reasons. Let me back up of that deep analogy. There's a huge number of reasons, even for a tiny population relative to the scope of humanity. A small population doing a relatively well-defined job still has a huge number of reasons they might need to be in an interface doing a thing. And what we have to do when we are designing the content for that and designing the experience itself is anticipate those and try and make sure that we've indicated that whatever reason they're coming there for, if it's a valid reason to use this piece of software, whatever reason they're coming there for, they see it reflected in the text and they understand what to do. That is a team sport, because I can't, and no individual person can anticipate all of those things simultaneously. We need to think them through sequentially. We need data to base it on. We need to understand, we need to hear from people who will use it, or people who would use it, to hear about how they think about it, and specifically, what language do they use? What's already in their head that we can use to reflect on that screen? So it's about understanding that space well enough, coming to understand that space well enough by communicating with other humans, to know what are the right things to represent and in what hierarchy or embeddedness or relationalness, and then use some grammar and punctuation and other tricks up our language sleeves.
Yeah. No, you're reminding me of, I've done so much conceptual modeling over the years. I did a lot of content modeling back in the day. Well, I still do. And it's always that like, and whenever I get grumpy and want to explain to people why my job is so hard, and like, everybody has a mental model of the world. And
Mhm.
as soon as you put two people together, that's hard enough. And then you put like diverse populations, like you're just talking about, agreeing on not a shared conceptual, but understanding everybody's mental model enough to do the things that you need to do to make everybody feel heard and included. Kudos to you
Yeah.
for being able to do that. But it's also like that there's both the task of getting that, arriving at some kind of shared understanding and ability to convey the meaning of a situation. There's sort of like that. And then there's like each individual, like how they're interacting with it. Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, it is. A lot of it is about, and I'm going to use an education word here. It's about prelecting. Prelecting is about, which is a word I didn't think was a word when I went to education school. And they're like, no, 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 this is totally a word. I promise. Cool. Prelecting is about framing a concept before people really encounter it. Usually it includes sort of seeding that language in, like I just did by saying, I'm going to use this word called prelect. That was a little bit of meta prelecting right there, because here I am introducing a concept so that you are clearing a little space somewhere in your mental model, knowing that something new is about to come. And so doing that context setting so that people have an entry point to it, so that we can say, hey, I'm going to tell you a thing and it'll connect to these concepts you already know. And as long as you have a trust relationship there, people will tend to at least start to form a connection to that part of their internal knowledge architecture, and you have more access there.
Yeah.
So in say a UX flow, what I might do is say, oh, here in this 20 screen flow that's deeply important, and let's use IT pros as an example again, because it's that concept of like people who need to manage big data systems. I personally am not one of those people. I have worked on some of their tools. What I do understand is that they have a lot to keep in mind. It is massive systems, and they are pretty robust systems. But if you screw up along the way in doing any of these things, it can have massive consequences that take days to fix and recover from. Nobody wants that. People want to be doing exactly the right thing and never take a false step. So in that context, so let's take these IT pros. They want to, here on step 20 in a 24-step sequence to do a thing, they need to understand some concept, or they need to have already had some piece of information, so that they can make the right decision in that moment about it. Well, if it's a sufficiently distant idea from that, like, oh, right, you've been setting up this data center in Kansas, and you also need to know about the security keys for your data centers around the world right there so that you can give it a unique one. I am making something up. It actually would never happen that way. But just something that is distant, that you wouldn't be in that corner of your mental model right then. So then what I do as a UX pro is I come in and I say, hey, can we hint to them earlier that they're going to need that they're going to need to be able to access that part of their mental model, even though it probably feels very distant. And I might not hint to it on screen 1 of 24 when they don't need it till 20. But I might think about, how are these things chunked up? Where is the earliest point that it would be meaningful to bring up that they will need access to this distant information?
Yeah.
And can we seed it in right there?
I love that word, prelecting. I'm going to add that to my vocabulary, but also this content, the way you were just describing that, it's like I'm trying to figure out the analogy because I think there's something similar that happens in, like a semantic engineering project. You're trying to, the whole point, and this is another thing you mentioned in your post, is to capture implicit knowledge and tacit knowledge in people's heads and implicit information that people have, so that you can do stuff with it, so that it's not just in somebody else's head, that you have a shared understanding or a shared ability to act on that information or that knowledge. Is that so? Does it make sense to try to stitch that notion of prelecting to that capture and sharing of implicit knowledge?
Yeah. Yeah. The implicit knowledge is in that context, I would connect them by saying that the implicit knowledge is sort of the internal framework that we tend not to be aware of. We tend to ignore it. It's the plumbing in the buildings or the electricity coming through the walls. Unless we are the plumber or electrician, we just think it'll work. And sometimes we have to go looking for an outlet or, look for the bathroom. But we expect it to be there. We depend on it. We expect it to work in a variety of ways that is extremely routine. Now, our implicit knowledge is something that most people don't think about most of the time. That's what makes it implicit. It is the stuff we don't talk about. It is, here I live in the Puget Sound in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S., and we have a ferry system to cross Puget Sound from various locations to various locations. And it is, you can drive on most of the ferries. You can also be a walk-on passenger to most of the ferries. How to engage with those ferries is intimidating. I have definitely met people who do not, who are scared to engage with this because it looks intimidating because it is poorly communicated how to do the things. Like you drive into some lanes, you might be told, you might be given some information if you're driving on, you drive up to a kiosk and that follows a regular mental model. You drive up to a window and somebody is there and asks you how many people in your car and you give them money and they pay you. That is a regular, you probably as a driver have that implicit knowledge. But what happens after that? If you live in the area and you ride the ferry regularly, you know that you drive into a lane that may or may not be near the front or the back. The lanes are numbered, but does that have any meaning? Nobody knows. The person at the kiosk may tell you, oh, go to lane 9 or 10. Is there a difference between 9 or 10? I don't know. What's happening here? You go to a lane, you park, and everything seems to be fine. So if you leave your car running, people might give you dirty looks. None of this, there's so much implicit knowledge there.
Right.
Eventually somebody might come and eventually cars will start moving and you go, oh, should I start my car? I don't know. And you go with the flow, you get directed maybe well, maybe poorly, into a spot on the ferry. If it's your first time there, you will definitely leave too much space in front of you on the ferry. And then you're just there. And there's announcements that you can barely understand over the loudspeaker. And, right, so I will quit because
I love that analogy, though, because I think it points to, there's so much implicit knowledge, the ferry guy. The people in the reflective vest guiding you, they're just oh, come on, you're an idiot. So the idea is to somehow get that tacit knowledge out of their head about no, here's how you behave in a ferry line and somehow convey that to people. So I think maybe the big lesson here in both UX work and in ontology design, any kind of modeling the knowledge in a domain, you have that like the discovery project and a lot of those cues you mentioned, like 9 or 10, does it matter? Or, what do I do? Why are people staring at me? Oh, because my engine's running. Like
Right.
seeing those kinds of like, little glitches in the matrix of your environment, like as cues. Because like if you hear when you're doing like conceptual modeling or like knowledge modeling, if somebody says, "Well, just ask Jill, she knows that," and you're like, "Ooh, that's your antennas go up," and you're like, "Okay,
Mhm.
we got to get not just talk to Jill, but her contemporaries and all that stuff as well." So is that like those insights you just shared? And I love the fairy example. Is that sort of are there lessons out of that that you apply in your kind of discovery work about what is our shared meaning here? Like, what does it mean if you leave your engine running or, you know,
Absolutely. There's this thing that happens when I'm talking with a team in a discovery process or in a um even working deep within the UX where I'm saying like, oh, okay, so the problem here is low adoption or low understanding or high support costs. And I'm coming in going, okay, which parts here might be confusing? And I am rarely the intended user for the thing. So I listen to the engineers, I listen to the PMs, I listen to the UX designers, I listen to users if I have those available to me. And I go, I'm listening for those little cues, those little signal words. And especially when I hear, say, my engineers or PMs use words that are, especially if they're saying using a word that maybe I think I know this word, but they seem to be using it in a special way. And especially they seem to be frustrated that other people don't get it. And the real tip off is when they're using a word and nobody else is. And I think, oh, here is a break in the mental model between people in this group. And so it's not being reflected. This is a semantic gap in the UX itself where people, this is not being communicated, this is not being conveyed. And in those cases, I most frequently use the word like, you keep using that word. I think I know that word, but I might not be understanding it the way you intend. Can you walk me through or explain to me like I'm 5? And usually that uh, people are either very willing to explain it right then or are just exasperated, like, how could you not know this obvious thing? And I say, oh, I'm very sorry. I don't know this very obvious thing. But let's walk through and I promise I'll do better in the future. And
that's
in general, those are the moments. Listening for those little things is tough.
yeah, and the role we both occupy in that world gives you permission, a lot more permission to do that than if you're the guy and the person in the next cubicle who just assumes you know what it means. That's kind of our
Right.
job to tease that out. But that notion of shared meaning, I think, and I want to go back to your dad and the psych project because that was one of the
Yeah.
things that was in there, and that excitement you had when you discovered the psych project, and I was like, why is she so worked up by this? Oh, her dad was a philosopher, and it's like, and but also the connection between language, semantics, meaning,
Mhm.
accomplishment. Like kind of, it's like the reason we align around these things is so we can do stuff better, like navigate a UX experience or organize a bunch of knowledge. Tell me a little bit about your, like, had you heard about psych from your dad? Is that right? Or
I did. And just a little bit before I sent out that newsletter, because it struck me um like a ton of bricks because I'd been thinking about community and worldwide community of people working in these knowledge and content spaces, um, and how we have barriers within that community, whether they're language barriers or location or status or access or all of those. Then we were talking about AI and various AI things that become available and the effective AI usage on people and how that is just barely being studied right now, really. But those effects are very interesting. Some are alarming, some are just fascinating. And he brought up, well, the psych project. And I went, what is this thing? And it really put a pin in connecting all of these ideas that LLMs, for example, are built on understanding. And by understanding, I mean creating vector relationships based on how different tokens within language are represented and used in repetitive ways. So by consuming an enormous quantity of content, it learns, and by learns, I'm using like air quotes with my fingers right now. It constructs a probability matrix to understand that. And here's where language just isn't adequate, because it is not an understanding, it is a construction. Cool construction, incredibly powerful. Wow. But it's built on things that we actually are willing to talk about. There are hundreds of things you can look around your space right now and think about, oh, I wouldn't talk about that. Like the molding around my window and how I feel about it. Right?
No, and when the threshold to when it does become worthwhile to tease it out or to even call it out, like you said, there's so much implicit knowledge, and that was one of the things in the Psych project was this attempt to capture like common sense knowledge and just facts about the world, and I think they got up to like 1.5 million. Representations of knowledge in the world, concepts that that you could do something with in a system, which is what knowledge engineering is all about. It's it's just fascinating stuff. And go ahead.
I am fascinated with just the way they had to construct the axioms, right? Like, how do I tell a computer that this is a fact? How do I tell a computer that this is an object and this is a fact about its relationship to another object? And those are problems that, is, I think, the water you swim in right now. And it's been worked on in part by this project, the Psych project, and like establishing how to codify those things in a way for it to be useful to computers is the foundation on which these LLM vector spaces could be built.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's I was at the semantics conference in Vienna last week, and that's all. This has been a topic of conversation in the knowledge graph world since, the last 3 years. But it really, and it's been sort of in the air, but this is the first conference. I've been to most of the conferences the last 4 or 5 years. This is the first time where every single session and every single hallway track conversation was about this complementary nature. Like a lot of what you're just talking about, and you really articulated well, both the power and the limitations of LLMs, like how they, understand, like how they observe and make predictions about the world, and then the benefits of organizing knowledge about the world and so the two turn out to be extremely complementary. That's literally the whole theme of that conference. And so I don't want to, maybe we won't figure this out in this conversation, but I'm really curious about how these kinds of insights, this kind of back and forth between those two things, and the back and forth between the evolution of like UX practice and UX writing and content management and content design. And it just feels like there's going to be a productive relationship there as well. That my fingers are crossed that there will be more attention to meaning. And this is one of those things, as a craft, as a discipline, I feel like we just need to tease out your implicit knowledge about imbuing meaning in user experiences and get that in an ontology, and then we can have better UX systems out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm working on the knowledge graph of connecting UX skills and what those can do to business impacts. I wish that I could make the same book just about that semantic knowledge. Like when we do semantic design, it has effects on every level of the interface and every level, not just of an interface, but of an experience. And I tried to go Oh, that was one of the skills I was writing, like, look at all of this design, this semantic design, and it was too big for one UX skill. And, right now we have it captured as design for structure, right? Like design for the implicit structure within the domain and experience and actions that need to be taken. But it feels like itself only a pale shadow of what it could be.
Yeah. And we're coming up on time, but we need to wrap up. But one thing I want to say, I hope you know Andy Fitzgerald in Seattle. Did you meet him out? Yeah. And in terms of like the link between the UX world and the semantic world, and he's just like, you two should collaborate. I'm just going to throw that out there.
I don't know him well. I think we've been introduced a couple of times.
Well, one of the projects he did to play with, to experiment with and show the benefits of semantic technology, he did a website called uxmethods.org, which I hope you've discovered it, because you can add the business layer to that. I think that was more about practice. But anyhow, hey, we are running close to time. But before we wrap up, is there anything we haven't covered in the conversation, or that you want to revisit, or just want to share before we leave?
Yeah, you, when you had reached out to me initially, you were like, this thing you said in this post, I want to make sure we mention it. So I'm going to bring it up, that I had written about about LLMs, that the LLM word generation, the generation of content, is all about sequencing the next word to include. And this is why so many of them gave such long responses in their early days, because like, oh, I bet that there will be something in here that is exactly what you want. But as a professional content creator and, user of content to create experiences, and create business impact, most of the work, absolutely a huge percentage of the work, is about deciding what to leave out, right? I don't want to just keep sequencing the next word in a line in case I might cover the topic someday. I want to leave out everything that isn't germane to this moment for the populations that need to see it.
I love that. That's I've seen many observations about the capabilities and limitations of LLMs, but that's one of the best ones, and especially in contrast to what humans bring to the writing process. That's lovely. Hey, one very last thing, Torrey, if folks want to connect or follow you online, what's the best place to find you?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn, where I'm the only Torrey Podmajersky on LinkedIn. They can also come to my website, catbirdcontent.com, and there's a variety of ways to get in touch with me there.
Excellent. And your newsletter is great. And it led to this conversation. So thanks for that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Torrey. It's always great to chat. This was a particularly good conversation.
Thank you so much, Larry. Always a pleasure.
For show notes and to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at knowledgegraphinsights.com. And please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening.